In today's video, we're going to be diving into when to expect your peak fall foliage this year in 2025. Before we get into things, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment down below with your location, and I will be responding to as many comments as possible, letting you know if I expect you to see your peak fall foliage earlier or later than what's typical. With all that being said, let's dive into things, and this is going to be your annual averages at first. We're going to go over kind of what's typical as far as what portion of what months you expect to see your peak fall foliage, and then we're going to dive into some of our temperature forecasts from our fall and winter forecast so that we can get an idea of the areas that might be experiencing it a little bit later or a little bit earlier. Again, if you do that comment and like and subscribe, I'll be responding to as many of those as possible with a little bit more of an in-depth look, but we're going to try to figure a lot of it out in the video today. So let's take a look at our first layer, and this is going to be the late September layer. And this is obviously going to be pretty exclusive for some higher elevation, more northern areas. So we see a lot of your northeast peaks, I would say, because it is really just the peaks of the Adirondacks, the Green Mountains, the White Mountains, and portions of Maine there, as you can see. As we take a peek out west, we can see the Pacific Northwest. A lot of your highest mountain peaks are seeing their peak fall foliage here in late September, as well as some of the Sierra Nevada mountains here as well. Looking towards the Rockies, we can see a lot of areas included here throughout states like Arizona, Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, and of course Montana, where Montana, we're really looking at like half the state. Same thing with Wyoming. These are extremely tall mountains, as we all know, so they see it much earlier than surrounding areas. But for 99.9 of you, this is kind of irrelevant here. So let's move on to the next layer, where we will start to talk about some populated areas. And this time around, we are seeing a lot of, well, first off, this is for early October, by the way, in now the cherry red areas, and we could see a lot more of Washington, Oregon, and California there, mostly along the Cascades and the Sierra Nevada mountains, but we're starting to get into more of the middle elevations of these mountain ranges, and there is towns in here. We also see some of these more coastal mountain ranges of Washington as well. Looking at the Rockies, we're now talking about most of your higher elevation locations being included throughout these Rocky Mountain states, as well as a lot of your Four Corner states as well, down there in the very far southern Rockies. Outside of that, we do see areas in these more very far northern plains, Midwest, and Great Lake locations like northern North Dakota, northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, the upper peninsula of Michigan there, and then some of the northern lower peninsula of Michigan as well, starting to get involved with their peak fall foliage by early October. We also see some of the areas there, mostly to the west of the Finger Lakes area in New York. So we see northern Pennsylvania, southern New York in there. We see the Catskills involved, pretty much the entire Adirondacks. We see the Green Mountains, well, really the whole state of Vermont almost, except for that river valley there bordering along New York. We also see the Berkshires here of Massachusetts, essentially most of your White Mountains and some surrounding areas, and then the northern two-thirds of Maine, all in this early October region there. Again, the cherry reds. So we've covered some populated areas, but let's get even more people involved here, because by mid-October, we will see maybe half the nation seeing their peak fall foliage. Now, by this point, we can see the orange areas. Now, almost all of the Northwest are covered. We see a lot more of the plains, like the rest of North Dakota, a lot of South Dakota, a lot of Nebraska, eastern Colorado, and even into a little bit of northwestern Kansas there. They're all seeing their peak fall foliage by mid-October. We also see the rest of Minnesota, so we're talking about Minneapolis, the northern half of Iowa, some of northern Illinois, but on average, it'll mostly be north of Chicago, although it is a little bit tough to say peak fall foliage wise, and the reason being is because each tree species does vary. So usually these types of annual statistics try to take the average of every tree species and try to come up with a number here, but I'm sure in Chicago you're so close it would be hard to tell the difference between now and when you actually see your literal peak, it's probably not too far off. We see a lot more of Michigan getting involved, some of central and eastern Ohio as well. The mountains of West Virginia, so we're starting to get the northern Appalachian Mountains pretty much covered here. Pennsylvania, most of that state covered. New York, a lot of New England, with the exception of maybe Boston, a lot of Rhode Island, southern Connecticut, which is the more populated regions of Connecticut, of course, New York City. But again, all of these areas are so close to the line of being in your peak fall foliage. You're probably seeing a lot of fall foliage by this point. It's just not literally the peak. Let's keep going though and add the late October area, which is this yellow one. And you can see that these are kind of progressively getting larger and larger. And now we're talking the panhandle of Texas, panhandle of Oklahoma, the majority of Kansas here, eastern Nebraska, southern Iowa, almost all of Missouri, I think all of Illinois here, all of Indiana, southern Michigan, the rest of Ohio, the rest of West Virginia, and now we're starting to see Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, the mountainous areas in the north. Elevation does play a pretty large role here. The Smoky Mountains throughout Tennessee and North Carolina, and even back through Virginia, where we see most of that state covered, except for my neck of the woods in the eastern area. We do have to wait a little bit longer. We do see Maryland, D.C. area kind of right on the cusp. Southern Pennsylvania, especially southeastern, now starting to see their peak fall foliage, typically by late October. Most of New Jersey, and now the rest of southern New England as well. Let's go ahead and move on again towards the early November region. Actually, this color is the hardest to see, especially in the Southwest, but the Southwest, we've really stopped expanding that much because there's a very sharp difference between the mountains and then the deserts and the lower elevation areas. So you see this like very tight gradient. So don't worry too much about that. We'll cover a new color in a second and it'll get a little bit easier to see. But for early November, we see more of Texas, almost all of Oklahoma. I would say over half of Arkansas. Now we're starting to see some of the deep south states, the northern regions of them at least, like northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, northern Georgia, upstate South Carolina, most of North Carolina, almost all of Virginia now, and we're pretty much seeing the heart of the Mid-Atlantic covered by early November. Let's again add another shade here, and this is going to be the mid-November shade. And we can see now the lighter browns, like I said, in the Southwest, these darker browns. So we see a lot of like the valleys in California starting to see their foliage, if they see any, by mid-November. A lot of these areas in the desertous Southwest don't even really have trees. So, of course, the foliage is non-existent. We do see a lot more of Texas covered, northern Louisiana even, the rest of Arkansas, almost all of Mississippi, almost all of Alabama, a lot more of Georgia, like central and a lot of southern Georgia, almost all of South Carolina, and quite literally all of North Carolina and the rest of Virginia there. We're even seeing some of the Florida Panhandle getting involved by mid-November. Finally, let's take a look at the late November area, and we're starting to slow down now because we're reaching towards the territory where they don't even see fall foliage really. It's also important to note, I can't believe that, well, I did draw earlier. I was about to say I haven't been drawing a lot this video, but a lot of these southern areas, especially these areas that are just on the cusp, where it's like they kind of see a foliage, kind of don't, and that's going to be for a lot of like the deep south here, where I've never experienced a fall time here, but a lot of the stuff that I hear from comments over the years is that it's a lot less colorful. The leaves kind of just die on the trees, and a lot of times they stay up in the trees. And it'll take a big windstorm maybe to bring some of them down, but they don't turn super bright red and they don't turn yellow and orange. It's more of like a brown dead leaf, and then they do eventually fall. So it's important to note that there is some variance as to what fall foliage means depending on where you're at. Of course, I want to point that out. But some of these areas in far southern Texas, a lot of Florida, a lot of southern Louisiana, may not even see really much fall foliage, and the trees might really stick around for the rest of the year. And that's where these gray areas come in. We don't really have a title for this. This is the areas that on average really don't see much in the way of a fall time as far as the foliage is concerned, like Southern California, parts of Arizona, the desertous areas, like I mentioned, then southern Texas, southern Louisiana, and most, I would say 2/3 of Florida here don't really see that change of the leaves and then the dying of the leaves. It's much more of a maybe even sticking around all year. You guys would have to let me know down there in the deep south. I know there's some variance as to what occurs, but when half of your trees are palm trees, you know, those obviously don't go anywhere. So that plays a role as well. It probably depends on the species, of course, but it is interesting. So let me know in the comments if you guys have any input. If you guys do live down there, let us know what it's like in some of these areas. Now, again, this is your annual averages. This does not change. This is the same map I showed last year. This is the same map I'll show next year. However, we want to talk about kind of the differences as to what we can anticipate as far as timing, or maybe even the odds of seeing better foliage, because again, those deep south locations just doesn't get quite as cool. But if it's a little cooler than normal, maybe that gives it a little bit more saturation. I don't know what you'd really call it, vibrance. Now, as we look out west, we do expect above normal temperatures for the fall of 2025. You can check out the full fall forecast on our channel, of course. We uploaded it maybe close to 2 weeks ago, so you guys can go find that. We do see out west, we expect overall warmer conditions, so this might make the fall foliage a bit later. Typically, I would say that the expected difference with these types of temperature anomalies would be 1 to 2 weeks. It's nothing crazy. You're not going to see things a month later or a month earlier, but maybe 1 to 2 weeks difference overall, which is a little significant, but not as crazy as you might think. And then in the east, we do see a lot of cooler conditions starting with the plains and looking eastward. So perhaps for a lot of these areas that do expect fall foliage, this would mean that we do see again, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks early compared to those maps that we just shown. And for some of these southern areas where, again, it either dies and just falls off with no color, or maybe even some of these areas that typically don't see much foliage, maybe this is enough to turn the tides. Time will tell, of course, but it might be a little bit more vibrant down here than what's typical for these areas that typically don't experience as much color. I know personally that even areas in more of like the middle ground here don't have as good of color as like your upper Midwest, Great Lakes, and Northeast locations like New England, where obviously they're very famous for their fall foliage. So there is levels to it where we would say this is the best, this is really good, this is pretty good, and then it's like kind of still a fall time, kind of not. So it just depends. But we might be pushing all of these lines a little further southward if it is cooler than normal. So that's kind of where that pertains for. And then as a bonus, we're going to show the wintertime temperatures. Of course, most areas don't see fall foliage beyond November, but if there is anywhere out there that this is enough to change things, we do expect kind of similar conditions to the fall, except we actually expect a little bit warmer compared to normal for the wintertime out west, and a little bit cooler in the east compared to what we expect for the fall. So in general, we expect the fall to kind of be the setup in the beginning of a pattern that's taking shape. We saw this last winter actually as well. And then the winter time is when that final pattern takes hold, and it's actually going to be vastly the majority of the winter time. So if you want to check out the winter forecast as well, that is also on our channel. We uploaded that one, I think, the day after our fall forecast. So you guys are more than welcome, of course, to check both of those out. With all of this being said, guys, this is it for this video. I am considering, I've done these peak fall foliage videos for a while now. I'm considering making one similar to this in addition that isn't your peak fall foliage, but it's actually just the first fall foliage, if that makes sense. So instead of it being the map based on your peak, it would be when you're starting to see the first little bits of color. I know a lot of people get excited about this stuff, so let me know in the comments as well if you guys would want that video, because I want to get some feedback. I've never done that type before. This is obviously already a fall foliage video, so let me know if you guys would like an additional one with a little bit more information as far as the timing. Be sure to subscribe. You can like the video as well. Hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Anyway, guys, with all that being said, I will see you guys in the next video.